With me today is Zach Hayes from Academy Mortgage, and he agreed to come on camera with me and talk about first-time homebuyer assistance programs available in Utah right now. Thanks for being here, Zach.
Absolutely. Happy to be here.
This is how this came about. Over the weekend, I did a poll on my Instagram stories and I asked people, hey, what do you guys want to hear about? And gave them a couple options. And first-time homebuyer assistance programs won by a landslide. So I figured, okay, I need to have someone come and really kind of dive into this. And we'll try to go to state, county, and then maybe some city level assistance, just so we can cover some of the needs of our first-time home buyers. Because we all know that right now, the hard thing for first-time home buyers is coming up with that down payment, right? I feel like that's the struggle. So take it away. Let's tell us about those.
Okay. Well, thanks so much for having me on. I'm excited. Janice is just awesome. We closed the deal just a couple of weeks ago. I mean, and she just killed it. Just got so many concessions, a reduction in the purchase price. I mean, the payment was phenomenal for this market. I couldn't even believe it. I think it was almost under 2,000.
That was a really good deal. Yes.
Which is crazy. I mean, so there is deals out there. And if you're looking for them, she'll help you find them. First-time homebuyer grants, they are loans, grants, whatever you want to call them. They have a lot of nuances in them. But I'll actually run through a little bit of them pretty quickly because I know people's time is valuable. So the biggest one I think that most people are kind of looking at has been more of on a state level, right? And this one's been more talked about, I think, in the news, on different news outlets. And this is a $20,000 grant that's established by Utah Housing. It's a 0% loan with no monthly payments during the loan. It's designed only for first-time home buyers and also only for new construction homes. And they're up to $450,000. There is income limits, which I'll kind of go over here in a second. But the income limits on this are actually pretty favorable. I'd say most are in the mid figure range for a household. And the other little get you on this one is that you have to be a Utah resident for at least 12 months. And 20 grand, this can be applied towards a down payment, closing costs, or even principal reduction. And you don't have to use the whole 20,000, but it is a really nice program.
No, this one is really good. I actually closed on one. It really did help their payment come down to where they wanted it. One thing I wanted to point out, first-time home buyers, a lot of them are college students, and they're used to hearing the word grant. To me, the word grant was always free money.
Yes.
So we have to make that distinction, I feel like, because sometimes we hear the word grant and we think it's money that we don't need to pay back, but this is a loan, right? So will you just explain real quick what happens if someone needs to either refinance or when they go to sell their home, how this gets paid back?
Absolutely. But a Utah housing loan essentially allows you to do a couple of things. There's a first mortgage, which is going to be for the majority of the mortgage. And depending on if you need to use a grant or not, you can actually use a subsequent mortgage to cover the down payment and closing costs. Now, if you qualify for this state level assistance on this case, you could eliminate the second mortgage payment, which I'll show you an example here on this next slide. You can see the differences. It shaves off about $110 a month by using this. And so what happens is when you want to refinance, or let's say like you want to sell your home, if there's not enough equity, the state will split the difference in it with you. So let's say if you bought a house for $300,000 and you took out the $20,000 state assistance, and now you owe $305 when you sell it. The state will actually split that difference with you based off of the net proceeds.
That's great. I did not know that. That's awesome.
And so that's what's kind of nice. And granted, that might change depending on how the market reacts, right? I know that this is like one of those things that there's always nuances within the program. But essentially what would happen is if you wanted to refinance, there would need to be enough equity to be able to pay off both the first lien mortgage and then this grant. I mean, I use the grant word kind of loosely, right, but in order to have enough equity in the house to pay off both of those. And once that happens, then those would both be eliminated. And then you could then refinance onto like a traditional standard FHA loan or a traditional VA, USDA, or conventional loan. It is nice because it does save you some money, but you can see if it's a reason for you not purchasing a house, it saves about $110 a month. And for most people, I think they could probably find it in their budget to save another $110 a month. So that's not to say that it's not an awesome option if you can't get it, but it's also not the kiss of death if for some reason you find an existing home that you love, let's say at $460,000. It's still okay. You could probably figure out a way to save the extra $110 a month and do just a traditional standard Utah housing loan with a second mortgage to cover your down payment and closing costs. So
well, and it's a 0% loan. So where else can you find a 0% loan, right?
Exactly. Exactly. It's 0%. And on a standard Utah housing mortgage, the second mortgage, which in this case, if you weren't using the grant, is actually going to be around 8% on that second mortgage, which adds a pretty substantial payment.
Right.
And so going from a difference of almost 0% a month on a loan to, let's say, 8% is a pretty significant difference in your monthly payment and the amount of interest that you would owe ultimately when you sell or refinance. grants. But probably one of the most popular ones, especially in the areas that Janice and I work in, is the Davis County Homeownership Assistance. A lot of the people initially thought this was going to be a grant, but this is up to $50,000, which is a pretty substantial amount of money. And the way that this repayment terms is it's 1% compounded annually, and you do not have a payment until the loan is repaid. 50% can go towards your down payment. So you do still have to, in most cases, come up with a little bit of your down payment. Most loans offer around a 3% down payment. So you'd have to still come up with around 1.5%. They have a max purchase price, which could be existing or new construction. It's $500,000, and the home must be under contract. So you can't, whereas on the Utah Housing First-Time Homebuyer Assistance, you can apply for that program before you're under contract. However, on this one, you have to have a home be under contract. They're a little bit harder on your income restrictions than the Utah housing programs are. However, they can still be met. I think it's important to note that not everybody will get the $50,000. It's not a set standard issued by Davis County. It's actually a combination of a couple features, mainly the biggest one being your debt to income ratio. So essentially what would happen is if you applied for a loan, it would be probably at the higher end of your affordability range. The $50,000 will be used to get your debt to income ratio a little bit lower to where it would be more comfortable of a payment, which can be a pretty substantial difference for most people. It can be a little bit taxing trying to find the exact amount, but that's kind of why it's important to find a lender that works with you on this. And then we could kind of go through different illustrations of purchase prices to see what that exact grant amount would be for you.
This one does give a lot more money. It does seem like it's a little bit harder to meet every single requirement.
Yeah. Well, I think another thing that you also need to consider with these is that this loan will have to be repaid as well. And so if it's something that like maybe in a market where you don't know if you're going to be in the house for a very long time, in my opinion, this might not be the best assistance program for you due to the fact that the $50,000 will have to be repaid. And if for some reason you bought a lower end purchase price home, $50,000 is a pretty substantial portion of that
Right.
purchase price. And so that would be kind of a pain in the bum to be able to try to get all that recuperated. And this is the same way, and they'll split the equity net with you. So essentially, if you sold the home for only a little bit more, they would still, but you'd still have to come up with some of a difference. And so you'd want to be careful, at least cognizant of that, being able to not being overextended, owing money on a house that maybe you don't intend on being in for a very long time.
Absolutely. I always recommend my buyers to not really buy unless they're planning on staying in their home for 5 to 7 years. So yeah.
Exactly. But that $50,000 can negate a pretty significant portion of your monthly payment.
Absolutely.
And this last one, a lot of our area focuses in Davis and Weber County. Owen and Ogden has been a grant program that's been around for a long time, and it's up to $10,000. Certain vocations, some police officers, teachers, stuff like that, can actually get it a little bit more additional assistance depending on the availability of funds. But it's for new constructions up to 432 and existing homes for 428. It's a 0% deferred payment loan, so it will have to be repaid, and it does have income restrictions. Owen and Ogden is very good, and it can be stacked with a Utah housing loan too, in case you're on the lower end of the purchase price spectrum. But Owen and Ogden has been really good to work with, and they're usually pretty quick on their turn times as well. They will require an inspection of the home to make sure that there's nothing like in the dire circumstance, but in most of the cases, it can be approved with just a city inspector.
This is a good one too. I mean, I have a soft spot in my heart for Ogden. It's really underrated and it's beautiful.
And there is Owen and Ogden. It's not all of Ogden as a city as a whole. There's certain areas in which you can get this and certain areas in which you can't. There's a map that'll illustrate, if you just typed in address, it would link you to if that area would be eligible for that. This is a good slide. I just think this is a typical, what most of the grant programs or first-time loans are based off of is the AMI, or area median income limit. And so this is a pretty good graph of where you can see the household size is the people that are in the home. So let's say if you are married with 2 kids, you would be a 4-person home, and your maximum yearly household income would be up to $85,000. So if you make more than that, you become ineligible for a lot of these programs. If you make less, you become eligible. As it's pertinent to understand them before you go into things so that you're not going in with higher expectations based off of your income limits.
With the Davis County $50,000 grant, if the income for 2 people is $68,000, usually at that income, you don't qualify for a $500,000 home. So it really does kind of sometimes, I don't know, contradict.
Yeah, when they initially release a lot of these programs, the general consensus is like to put it in the right perspective to getting people into homes. But it's also designed to get people assistance that really need the assistance.
That's true. Yes.
It's not based off of you being able to build a massive real estate portfolio. if you have a ton of money already set aside. But it can also be really awesome for first-time homebuyers, people that might be just barely graduating, people that might have one or two kids that are younger, getting started in their careers. There's definitely ways to make them work. And most of the cases, it will adjust your payment a couple $100 a month. But in most cases, we can find other avenues as well if home ownership is really what you're after.
And that's what I love about these programs is that they get the regular people that really want to get into their first home in the game.
I'll have Janice link these in here. But if you wanted to ever take a quick snippet of this, you could see that these are the contact individuals that we've had the most success in reaching for these various down payment assistance programs, all the way from Southern Utah to Northern Utah. And then here's the other one. And I'll send this to you so that you have it as well. But let's kind of
we'll put this as a resource in the description for sure. We covered a lot, but couple things that I took notes on. Number one, can you define what first-time home buyer is? Sometimes people think that a first-time home buyer is someone who's never owned a home. And that's not necessarily the case, right?
It's not. No, if you haven't, so let's say if I owned a home and I sold it and I haven't had any mortgage for 3 years, I can then be classified as a first-time home buyer again. So this is actually pretty common a lot of times for people that maybe went through a divorce or maybe sold a house and started renting because they thought the market was going to go down or something like that. They can then be again classified as a first-time home buyer.
What kind of mistakes do you see buyers making when they try to seek out these programs? Anything that they should be aware of?
Yeah, I mean, I really think don't base your decision of where you want to live or the house that you want based off of these grants. They will help your payment, and which is awesome. I mean, it's more like an added bonus. But if you want to live in a certain area and you just absolutely love the house, find the house that you love first, and then we can work on the background stuff of trying to save the monthly payment. Payments are like some of the most constricting things for people, but also we're in a highly elevated interest rate market in which I don't believe interest rates will always stay this elevated. And so a lot of the pain can be temporarily adjusted based off of contract negotiations or purchase price reductions or temporary interest rate buy downs, permanent interest rate buy downs to start to alleviate that payment to make you feel more comfortable in it. Ultimately, then when rates drop, we can then refinance you to make that comfortable payment.
Now, to wrap this up with a bow, what do you think is going to happen with interest rates? I mean, everybody always wants to know. I know we don't have a crystal ball, but what have you heard? Anything that you want to share there?
Yeah, I definitely think they're going to go down. There's been pretty substantial improvements all the way from October when they were around 8% to today hovering around 6.125%. That's a substantial decrease in 3 months. Now, I don't think that change is going to be as rapid over the next coming months, mainly because inflation is relatively sticky, which is one of the biggest components of why rates are staying elevated. However, it has been signs of inflation starting to decrease. And as a result of that, the Federal Reserve is intending on cutting rates. And so although that's not directly correlated with mortgage rates, a lot of times they'll follow suit. Most analysts are predicting we'll probably see them somewhere in the high fives to mid fives come quarter 4 of this year. In most cases, that's going to drop people's payment around $450 a month. So it's a pretty substantial change. But the other caveat is that as rates drop, purchase prices will start to increase.
Right. We don't want it to drop too fast because then
and so right now we're kind of seeing a good component in the market where we're seeing prices, they are elevating, but at a kind of a steady, more consistent rate, which is awesome because rates are dropping and homes are increasing steadily. And so you don't want it to go one or the other because then you get like a COVID 2.0 situation where dramatically low interest rates create people paying $100,000 over a house. That can put people in a space where they don't love it.
Absolutely. And I think that's one advantage of interest rate and the shift that we just had is that it's given us, number one, more home buyer assistance programs because I don't think anyone was really taking advantage of these in 2021 because there was just so much going on and people had to make decisions so quickly that there was just no time. But now we have a little bit more time where buyers can actually think about it or they can plan ahead. So for buyers who have been on the sidelines because they were waiting for interest rates to stabilize and they maybe want to buy this spring, summer, what should they be doing now to prepare for that?
I think the biggest thing is trying to pay off high interest debt. A lot of times we don't look at a mortgage lender that maybe, let's say using student loans, for example, maybe you have $50,000 in student loan, but maybe you have a $30,000 car payment that's $500. The $30,000 car payment is actually going to hurt you worse than a student loan payment. That's why it's important to talk with a lender because a lot of times people have, let's say, $1,000 credit card, but the payments on it's $300 a month. And so it's important to pay that off because then it helps your qualifying ratios to be able to go up a lot more. And the other thing is people think you need to have massive down payments. And it's always, which I'm an advocate for a massive down payment because it's great, but that is not the case. And I would say probably 95% of people don't bring in the conventional 20% down. Most people are around 3 to 5%, which is pretty doable in most cases. And the other thing is that there's a Utah housing program, kind of what we talked about, that will allow you to get into a house for zero down. So if you absolutely love something and you don't have the capacity to bring in a down payment, there is a way to get this. And those loans were extremely common before rates kind of went up. And now it's time that they're kind of becoming more common again, because you're not bidding against somebody that's going to be putting $20,000 above whatever you're going to be doing. And so now you can truthfully get into a house for zero down. And obviously, I'm always an advocate for trying to save and to do the things that you can. But in some cases, that you're not going to be capable of doing it. And maybe you're just graduating from college or a trade, and you put a lot of money and you paid your way through school so that you don't have this, and now your savings is depleted. These are good programs to be able to help you get into a home and a payment that you feel comfortable with. Now, I bought a couple of houses when I was first buying it. I was doing loans, and I was scared to death. It helps to have somebody to talk through things. Having a good team and a good support system that's not going to make you feel pressured into something and to make you feel the most comfortable is awesome. And so there's always almost a way to make it work as long as you're willing to make it work.
This has been awesome, Zach. Hopefully this helped a ton. First-time home buyers, at least give them a little bit of direction. Zach and I would love to be on your team, kind of help you through the process. So if you are watching on YouTube or Facebook, I will leave those resources in the description, along with a link to that cheat sheet that he put up there that you can get more information on all of these programs. If you're watching on Instagram, then I will put it on my link in bio so that you can have access to all of this. Anything else you want to share before we wrap up, Zach?
Just good luck. Let us know if you have questions, and have a great rest of your day.
All right, Zach Hayes from Academy Mortgage. I'm Janice Thomas, Powerhouse Real Estate, and we'd love to help you get into your next home. Have a great day.